Welcome to the fourth event in the series Supranational Democracy Dialogue. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm enthusiastic about the wonderful panelists that I'm going to introduce to you shortly. The topic of today is shifting the paradigm, new cultural models, new awareness. So we are going to speak about our relation as humans with Mother Earth. We are going to speak about the problems we have in this relation and how we cause suffering to Earth and how this is a reason for suffering ourselves. And so how we should change our relation with nature, our relation with economics, our relation with among ourselves. And so maybe this is the most important relation of all anyway. And so I'm very happy to introduce the first panelist for today. She is Myra Jackson, and an amazing person I had the occasion to get to know 2 years ago as she came in Lecce for the first edition of the Supranational Democracy Dialogue. She is incredibly an electric engineer by training, but she has an important role in the relation with nature of the whole humankind, if I can say so. As she received the title of Diplomat of Biosphere from the Stockholm Resilience Center. She works with the Geoversity Foundation as a senior advisor, and she works also, and most of all, with the General Assembly with a program called Harmony with Nature. So I'm very happy to give the floor to Myra Jackson. Thank you, Myra, for being here.
Oh, thank you, Susanna. Yes, you mentioned 2 years ago our being together, and a lot has happened since my presentation then. I really came to the conversation through the lens of the Renaissance that I feel is being led by the earth. And you know my view very clearly, and I'll share it with all of the listeners and the viewers that are with us today, that image of earth, that transmission from earth, I feel we are still processing 50 years later. And if we had taken the time, those of us who were living, to really get a sense of our common home and its place in the solar system and the galaxy, perhaps humanity as a keystone species on the planet would have found itself in right relationship within the web of life. And yet, because we are part of the greater whole, that is the earth, and of course the largesse of life beyond what we can see, we are now living in the global pause that is the COVID-19 pandemic. A pandemic we knew was coming, but we had no idea when it came. And of course, it's coming out of the great degradation and imbalance of the earth. Viruses being with us always, a carrier and a shuttle of DNA and RNA that naturally helps to rebalance the planet, just like the mitochondria that lives within our DNA balances constantly through evolutionary processes, the life on the planet. And so I feel very positive about what we're experiencing. We are out of the pause. I could have never, since being with you, Susanna, in Lecce 2 years ago, could have seen what we have witnessed in these last, for me, I've been in stand down for nearly 8 weeks now, going on 9. The global pause to me is a phenomenal pilot being led by the earth. And what we've learned already has shifted the global debate. And I want to talk about some of the ways it's done that. I mean, who would have thought in this global pause that we would have had a chance to see how quickly the earth is able to clear the water and the atmosphere? but we have seen it. And for those of us from Stockholm Resilience Center who understand the Earth and her systems through planetary boundaries, we know one of the most regenerative processes on the planet happens with the freshwater biome. And what we have now is the ability to look at what a twinkling of an eye looks like, of what regime shift looks like when it's led by the planet. And this data, as we've taken it in, because I've been working for several months now, in fact, since September, with the call to global leaders through the planetary emergency. And in that plea, we have seen a very rapid, as I say, movement in the parameters around the debate. The debate is not around financing and money. You just saw trillions of dollars printed, where before there was no money. And now there's a need to direct those funds in a way that is an investment toward a green economy and recovery. And so suddenly we now have an atmosphere where the metrics also have changed. There is a couple of things that have come up in this setting of the global pause that has advanced our conversation globally. The basic income is on the table, being discussed in real terms. Renewables are on the table, no longer on the sideline, but at the center. And so this conversation around suprastructures is of paramount importance for a humanity that's in the midst of forging a new social contract. And that new social contract will go beyond GDP. Finally, we'll be able to really look at the kind of metrics of an economy that is centered around the well-being of the planetary body, our larger body, in fact, and the wellness of people. And really, we're talking about the wellness of all life on the planet, and that we understand that our metrics need to be tied to real wealth and to health and to wellness. And so who would have known at the point when I was last with you that we would have a face on the youth movement, these human movements? The youth movement has a face, Greta Thunberg, and we sat together in Poland at the climate change meeting while many young people came to join in. And that will not go away. And what comes with that youth voice and that movement is a movement toward lifestyles that bring no harm to people or planet, and that will drive brands. And so the trusted brands that will remain is going to be an important part of the innovative drivers that will happen on the planet, because I see sheer opportunity for our species to take a leap in this pause. I see creativity and innovation on steroids. I see the possibility of a humanity that can become a zero-emitting species that brings benefits to the planet. We have in the mangroves all around the world, some of the most longest-lived species are zero emitters, and their very presence is a beneficial one. And so the metanoia that's called for now, that deep meta change of mind and consciousness that is called for now in our species, is one that brings us in harmony with nature through a recognition, of course, that we are nature, and that it doesn't make sense to be at war with yourself. It doesn't make sense to be a presence on the planet that works against that which you're sourced through and of. and that holds the implicate order of life. It's time for us just to simply recognize our real opportunity is not around survival, but it's around flourishing. Because we live on a planetary being that is a host to every mechanism of thriving that one could imagine. And the key is the imagination. And so I can't wait to hear the others who will speak and share their ideas. I have a sense that our conversations will be rich. And I've only mentioned just a semblance, a hair, a thread of all the things that are in front of us to engage and to discuss as we look at the suprastructures that will help and support us to become that species who is a beneficial presence on the planet. And so I really thank you for again being able to join and to kick off this conversation. I turn this back to you, Susanna, and the guests to follow.
Thank you, Mayra. That was a great introduction to our conversation. And let's say we can, I get from you that we can be optimist in spite of all, in spite of everything. So we have a chance as a species. And well, let's start from here. And I'm honored now to pass the word to a professor I can call my colleague in Università del Salento, Alberto Basset, professor of ecology. He's also in the board of Italian Society of Ecology Professors and in the board of European Federation of Societies of Ecology Professors, where he also played an important role, and still plays an important role. And most of all, he is also now prorector for sustainability in our university. So I invite Alberto Basset to turn on his camera and join our conversation.
Thank you, Susanna. Thank you for inviting me. And thank also to Mira for her beautiful presentation that leave me some way to be connected to what she already said. And basically adding a component that I think really important to us in order to actually being able to take this we can say extremely difficult period that we have experienced with this coronavirus to turn into an opportunity to change our approach to the economic and social development towards a more sustainable one. And in order to do that, what I think is that we also need basically to learn. And what I'm thinking to learn is that I think that we need to learn a bit more on nature, and we need to learn a bit more on actually which is the strategy of life on our planet. And that is probably what ecology can contribute in this discussion, even being completely aware that ecology is also need to change and need to evolve into a more transdisciplinary science to give a stronger contribution to changing the paradigm to deal in a better way with the development sustainability challenge. What ecology actually has done a lot has been in the past to show basically which could be the limit for that the environmental and ecological sustainability could pose to the development. And it is clear that our impact on the biosphere, on the other species, is impressive. I have taken a list of some papers that have been recently published, and one that was most impressive to me was a paper on the proceeding of the US National Academy of Science that has shown the allocation of the overall biomass on our planet among all the living components. And what it is shown in that paper is that we and our livestock constitute approximately the 95% of overall mammal biomass, leading to the wild mammal species less than 5% of the biomass on the earth. And even more impressively, I think is that again, we and our livestock represent the 20% of the biomass of all fishes in freshwater and marine environment, which looks absolutely incredible. So giving the idea that we could basically represent almost the same or similar biomass to the biomass of all fishes in the ocean, which looks to be an infinite sources for us. So that is just one example that is coming from what ecology studies, and then is also studying the potential solution. And what I would like to discuss with you in terms of which kind of model could be the study of the strategy of nature and the strategy of life in the biosphere, is that what could be basically the major strategic priority of the living component of biosphere, and what has actually made our planet as beautiful in terms of the landscape and the species that live in it. And if I could touch a number of strategical approach of nature, which we can use as model that could be basically offer as tested model for a wiser and safer development. But I'm going to stick only with three that I think are the most important, which is stability. So stability is the basic rule for the biological life in the biosphere. And the second one that I think is really relevant is adapt to live under resource limitation. So improving the quality of life instead of growing continuously seems to be a key of success for the species within ecosystem. And the third one and the last one is, well, biodiversity, which seems to be the real value for life. So I'm going to be just briefly with some example on this three strategy. And then as regards stability, a famous paper that has been published in the 70s, basically to test and with the expectation to demonstrate a positive relationship between species diversity and ecosystem stability, has actually shown that our ecological community, our ecosystem, will be basically extremely far from stability if species will have been simply arranged by chance. What makes the difference and what make stable something that could be otherwise completely unstable were the million of years of interaction among species that have produced a configuration of ecological community really unlikely in principle, but with a measured property that being stable through time. And what we observe now in the biosphere ecosystem is only what has ensured long-term stability of species population. We can say that the basic criterion to evaluate the success of any biological innovation ever appear in the biosphere is only its capability to drive long-term stability. That is, I think, the most important strategy that we can see in the biosphere, and we can have a clear sign of the strategy looking at the ecological community. And one of the most, I think, interesting is basically the clear difference that has characterized the evolution of prey defenses and the evolution of predator capability to capture their prey at all levels. So prey defenses have been evolving, become much more effective than the predator capability to capture. And the best example of that are plants. So, plants cannot move, plants cannot hide, plants are basically the most visible structural component of life in our terrestrial environment. And yet, plants has an impressive capability to defend themselves for herbivores because of their chemical components or their adaptation to the life cycle, but basically only less than 10% of what they produce are then actually consumed by the herbivores at the global level in the biosphere, and more than 90% is going around through the detritus food web. So that is giving an idea of how important is this process that is basically decreasing the efficiency in transfer and promoting stability among this plant and animal component. So if we then move to the second strategic priority in the biosphere with regard the adaptation to live under limiting condition, well, it is clear that more species, many species in nature largely fluctuate in their density through time, and they achieve their long-term stability only with an impressive reproductive effort and the capacity of live for long time period at extremely low density. So Malthus probably has been the first describing population growth in the modern way, would say about these species that they continuously fluctuate between a short-term well-being and the status of misery. But on the other hand, being able to perceive resource limitation and adapt the resource use behavior accordingly is a common repeated pattern observed for many species on our planet, and particularly for all species that have large individual body size, and they're being a key for achieving long-term stability. This behavioral adaptation to resource limitation prevent resource overexploitation and population overgrowth, which will lead to instability and potentially to extinction. So in other terms, what most of the species on our planet do is simply living on the interest of what their resources produce without decreasing directionally the natural capital through time. And then even more, most of the species share also the capability to change their energy strategy or their basically energy behavior from maximizing energy gain when resources are abundant to maximizing resource exploitation efficiency when they are scarce. So this procedure can guarantee their long-term stability through natural selection. That has been the key of success for the species that share with us the planet. Well, and finally, well, if we go to biodiversity, it is really a bit of a puzzle for us in terms of researcher, because we know very well that all the species in the planet are resource limited by resources that compete for resources. And as Darwin said, if the elephants were in the condition to realize their full reproductive potential, they will be able to cover all Africa in less than 1 million years, but it never happened because all species are actually limited in our planet. Nevertheless, biodiversity has continually increasing through time, is increasing in ecological timescale, even through a positive action of alien invasive species, we could say. And the same is true for experimental studies that have commonly shown that when species are added to community already at equilibrium, well, still some of them manage to invade the community and increase the diversity that is occurring. So as regards alien species, which is probably the most interesting case, they are generally considered a threat for biodiversity rather than a source of diversity. But a study on the Pacific Island plant biodiversity showed that a lot of alien species have invaded the island, substantially increasing the diversity of plant guilds. And the most impressive case is New Zealand. New Zealand, before human colonization, has basically 2,000 arboreal plant species. After human colonization, it has been invaded by more or less the same amount, the same number of alien species, which almost all of them have been naturalized, and we know only 3 known extinction, and all the other has been actually became part of the New Zealand arboreal plant community. So what we can say that these are clear evidences that emphasize the role of biodiversity, and we can also see other type of role of biodiversity, for example, an ecosystem functioning with primary productivity that seems to scale indirectly with plant species richness. Then biodiversity and the redundance of species is an insurance of the functioning of ecosystem, and biodiversity is also a control factor of pathogen infection to human. So what we can say with this respect is that we still have not decoded the mechanism underlying the observation that coexistence of newly colonized or invaders seems to be the rule rather than an exception. There are important theory in ecology that actually deal with this point, but this impressive evidence of biodiversity increasing in many conditions still has to be understood. But what this clearly demonstrates is that species diversity, as well the diversity within species, is a clear value within the ecosystem. So what we can say now is that if we compare our role and our current strategy on natural resource exploitation and our impact on natural capital, it seems that we actually do not perceive that we are resource limited, and we are behaving in a way that is very far from the development strategy of nature. So therefore, learning from nature is a great opportunity for us to make a selection among the economic and social strategy, taking advantages of all attempted success and failed mutation that has occurred in the history of life on our planet. And then, just as a very last point, and then I will leave as well the floor to my colleagues in this panel, is that another point that we need to consider is that in many cases, the actual governance, ecological governance of the ecological community and life on our planet is at the global level. It's related to species that actually manage to control the diversity and functioning on the ocean or our terrestrial environment. And so we cannot consider that we could control and improve our sustainability simply addressing this challenge at the small scale, at the regional or national level. It is clear that we absolutely need a level of governance which is comparable with the level at which the problem is realized, which is actually a global level. So just concluding, what I'm going to say that we can learn a lot from nature, and then we can learn a lot from nature also in terms of the political governance level that we actually need. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alberto. Definitely, we have a lot to learn, a lot to study. And I think we need absolutely also in our universities, in general, in the academic environment, to have more interdisciplinary studies and learning from each other and learning to learn from each other and to teach what we have learned from each other. So it's a lot of work because we have created a system where the knowledge is divided by field in a very rigid way, and definitely we are understanding that this doesn't work so much or not anymore. But what is interesting is that now we are going to move from natural ecosystems to human ecosystems from a social and economic point of view. So let me tell you a few words about our next panelist, Christian Schmitz, who is a businessman. He's a very interesting person, as he has had many careers, many experiences, so he has a lot to share. He comes from a corporate career, and he then became an entrepreneur, and serial entrepreneur, if I may say. And when I met him a few years ago, he was in the beginning of a new adventure, which is a group called the Purpose Driven Innovation Ecosystem, because Christian has a special talent in putting people together, in finding original and creative persons, and creating so a sort of ecosystem. And the ecosystem he has in mind, well, Kit will tell you better than me, is an ecosystem which works in the interest of everybody and interest also of nature. So please, Christian, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. And we have already heard two very interesting speakers, and especially in the last speech, what was talked about, ecology. That's in a sense what I'm leaning towards when I thought about building this purpose-driven innovation ecosystem. And yeah. So I will just try to share my screen. Let's see if it works. Can you see my screen? Can I have some feedback if the screen is visible?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, thanks very much. So like Myra in the beginning also said, 50 years ago, there was this expedition to the moon, and that was the first time when humans could view this beautiful blue jewel, which is our planet Earth. And our planet Earth is inhabited by so many species, and in the last in the last century we have exploited this so much. And Susanna has briefly introduced me as a businessman, and as a businessman what we are looking for is making profit, but only making profit will not solve problems. And I came to this actually, when we met a couple of years ago, and we have to always think to ourselves, whatever we do, why are we doing it, and what kind of contribution can we give, and what is the purpose which drives us? It's creating a value, it's contributing to the environment, it's contributing to societal problems. And for this, I thought, which fits very well to these supranational democracy dialogues, that we need a global discussion on these topics, because our situation is like it is. We have a social divide, a social and economic divide. We have extremely wealthy people and extremely poor people on the same planet. We have a loss of biodiversity, and the climate change symptoms become more and more dramatic. And now we have actually, it seems that at the moment in many countries the lockdowns are coming to an end, and that we can go back to what people call the new normal. Actually, I don't like this kind of term so much. I think that the new normal could become also a big excuse, and also the economic consequences of this global pandemic will become a big excuse to actually not to go in the direction to do what we should actually do, to work on sustainability. At the same time, we have overpopulation, and the world population is estimated to grow to 10 billion people by 2050. We are already at 7.5 billion. So we have to think not anymore like a businessman. We have to think more purpose-driven. We have to think not anymore about endless growth. We have to think about degrowth and how to live with less than with more, and how to, like Professor Alberto Basset said, we have to think about degrowth instead of growth. And we have tremendous opportunities and chances because we have unprecedented exponential technology. The question is only, how do we use it? Do we use it for a profit-driven scenario? Do we use it to increase control? Do we use it to increase the security of systems? Or do we use it in order to further elevate our humanity, to apply it to systems like biodiversity, to apply it to systems like tree planting, like ecology, and to apply it to a more human world where we can actually embrace this technology and work with this technology as a tool rather than getting enslaved by it. So, and in all this, there is a human being, and the human being could be me, could be you, and we are all in a kind of a way responsible. And that's also a very striking point, which I always tell to everybody I meet. Everybody has questions. What can we do? What shall we do? But don't ask these questions. Rather dive in and look what you can do and what you as an individual would be able to do. And as an individual, I have decided to create this community of like-minded people, of entrepreneurs, of change makers, and bring them together in a mutual vision, the vision of co-creating a better tomorrow. And how do we co-create a better tomorrow? By finding the most impactful and sustainable innovations and scale them to international markets. With our purpose-driven innovation ecosystem, building locally and scale globally, and find solutions for the grand challenges. In the 4 areas of renewable energy, clean water, food and agriculture, and circular economy. And we look at the society in terms of innovation stakeholders. We have the corporate side. The corporates still are a place where the majority of humans are spending most of their time. So the corporations also create most of the carbon footprint. So we need to do something to influence these corporations to go into a more sustainable way. And startups are agile. Startups have great ideas, and purpose-driven startups can actually help to shift the corporates into the right direction in a more agile way. And on the other hand, we have academia and science. So we can utilize these triangle in order to leverage the innovation. What we also need is capital. So we are working on creating a purpose-driven investor network, and we are convening these investors in. And actually, the last one was at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we usually come together in a nice lunch or dinner setting and exchange ideas, get to know each other's, and then also enable co-investment in opportunities. I have been also the only foreign member here in Japan of the Open Innovation Task Force. So I'm also very interested because in order to drive change, we very often need to rely on the regulatory framework of governments. So with our activities, we should also be able to have an influence on the government. And how can we do this with these three pillars? The PDIE Institute, Think and Do Tank, we educate and inspire. We create awareness, we gather experts, publish books and reports. And with PDIE Consulting, we shift the mindset of leaders, we implement and execute solutions. And we also match investors with opportunities. And the ecosystem building, finally, we bring together like-minded people for themed events. And it could be an event about energy, renewable energy. It could be something where we bring together a number of startups which work in the space of how to determine the different metrics for determining how sustainable a company is, for example. And we also create PDIE projects. We create the future. And this is the we is not only relating to the purpose-driven innovation ecosystem. The we includes everybody. So we means that anybody on this planet would be able to become a creator and to be able to create this positive future. And especially in these times, I just read an article today about people who in the midst of the pandemic actually have established new businesses. That's hope, and that's going forward into the future. I might already have used up my time. Susanna, is it still fine to speak?
You can have a few minutes more if you want, Christian.
Yes. Okay, so one of the projects which I'm actually working on right now is the Sdgs Lounge Tokyo, which is supposed to become an international corporate lounge to shift the leadership of corporations towards more sustainable activities. You of course, everybody knows the Sustainable Development Goals, and this is something which I already talked about. We have the greater effect, so the coming generation, they have a new mindset, and they will not buy anymore from corporations who, in their viewpoint, are not sustainable. So corporations have to prepare themselves for becoming more sustainable. It's urgent, it's more sustainable, it gives benefits, it strengthens the brands. And what we imagine, or what we envision the SDGs Lounge Tokyo to be, is not a kind of a training, it's bringing together the next generation sustainable leaders in the corporations, which are approved by the top management, and also convening a number of corporations with a considerable carbon footprint, with a considerable size, in an open innovation circle. So that in this open innovation circle, we bring together not only domestic people here in Japan, but we connect them to international ecosystems. And we also plan to have study tours to Sweden and Germany and maybe other countries as well. This is how it looks, an open innovation ecosystem. And we want to do this offline and online. We have 3 different modules, and we connect, scan, focus, and act. The connection is actually including the human connection. And
Thank you, Christian.
Yes. Okay.
I think you will have the opportunity to add something more when we will have a second round of interventions. But I think we have learned quite a bit of what it's all about. I mean, it's really changing the approach we have with the economic environment, and most of all, the approach we have with the collectivity. So everybody is relevant and everybody can make a difference towards the collectivity and the economic system, as a consumer, as a producer, as a business people. And so I think it's really important what you're doing. Really, thank you on behalf of humanity, if I may. And you touched upon a very interesting point, as you mentioned several times the word leaders, and how important it is to have leaders in this process. And so I think this leads us to the next panelists. And so I'm very happy to introduce Nina Del Mar and Stefan Weber. Nina and Stefan are located in Berlin, and they have co-created, if I can use this word, the New World Fellowship Foundation. So Nina comes for a very interesting experience in San Francisco as a leader of an organization creating experiences for people wanting to be more in contact with themselves and with the others. And so she worked on programs focusing on the importance of inner leadership, while I think Stefan has an experience more as a leader himself, as he started as a young leader in the activist movements in the Eastern Germany, and then he had a very interesting experience in the international relations environment, in the European Union environment. And most of all, he's now the Secretary General, if I'm correct, of the Arctic Forum, which is an open non-profit platform which puts together Arctic-focused actors in politics, science, civil society, and business. So a very interesting experiment, both in supranational democracy and in dealing with the environment. So I give them the floor. I'm sure they will have something very interesting to add to this conversation. Thank you, Nina and Stefan.
Okay, can you hear? Good.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for having us, Susanna, to speak in this diverse panel, and yeah, very interesting perspectives. And just to share a little bit about myself as well again, that I think as we're talking about what's happening in this world and about leaders, it comes down to actually a source of our work that we do in this world, and that source is our personal experiences. And my own personal experiences in San Francisco, I was living, I would say, a life of abundance. And I had all the external things that if you had a list where you say, this is what leads to a good life, check, 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 I had them. But inside, I didn't feel that. And it was because it was not a sustainable lifestyle. It was not sustainable. And it came through a great pain of becoming aware of this that led to a shift in a new awareness. It was a personal paradigm shift. And I think the microcosm is reflected in the macrocosm. So I want to bring in this reflection of our personal pains, our personal stories that that we're experiencing individually, that we can also see what's happening globally, because a lot of us are not having sustainable lifestyles, and there's a deep pain that comes with that realization. But in that pain is also a shift to, now, how do I live a sustainable lifestyle? Because this shift has happened in a way to me, and I find that I am actually much happier now, as Christian Schmidt said, living with less, but actually with more. And this is what I find personally in my life. And in this transition also came, things also happen in life which guide you, which seem to guide you. Another realization is that things can happen very quickly in this world. They can shift, and we can see this also what's happening now. We see, as Myra was also talking about, that quickly the pollution is down. That we see in Earth changes happening in this Earth that's affected by human activity, and because there's less human activity now in the way that we were flying here and there easily and buying this and that, you know, there's less. It feels like Earth is getting a chance to breathe and bloom. And this is a beautiful realization that this can happen quickly. And also, what is supporting this change, this quick change, is world leaders, because they are making decisions that is affecting how we're all living, right? So our work is supporting this and ensuring that let's say the leaders are becoming really aware of, it's not just me and mine anymore, but it is us, thinking globally, thinking, yes, me, mine, and us, And from this new awareness, decisions are being made that benefits all. So it's very beautiful, humbling work. It relies on this connection to one another and this important connection to yourself to do this. Stefan?
Yeah. So it's the internal transformation of the leaders that is relevant. Can you hear us? Yeah. Okay. So as you mentioned, Susanna, thank you very much for this introduction. It's correct. I have been involved in some ways with this topic of supranational democracy. So democracy is very dear to me, being born in East Germany and being young enough and old enough to be active then in the opposition movement in East Germany. So yeah, being involved in setting up a new democratic system after the shift, after the paradigm shift thereafter, which is called the fall of the wall, which was preceded by some things, and which I will come back to, which finally led me then to some more than a decade of working in international politics in Brussels, and later also setting up a foundation on the my beloved area of the Arctic, working in international climate politics. But that's not the only thing. It's also a lot of interconnection with topics of investment, science, political strategies, and despite what some people would call quite some success in giving the EU a holistic policy and some more well-established connections, it led also to a deep frustration because indeed what we were setting out to achieve in the Arctic, to preserve the Arctic somehow and find a good balance with human activities, was not achieved, for the simple reason that that cannot be done in the Arctic, and it can also not be done in Brussels. What it needs is a paradigm shift. It's a shift of consciousness, and that's what is ultimately needed. So that is my experience also in working with politics, as a political advisor, as a Secretary General, as a scientist, political scientist and lawyer also. The true paradigm shift actually happens before it becomes visible. It's these small circles that gathered in the Black Forest during the World War II. It's the small circles that gathered under the roof of the church in East Germany and in Eastern Europe. It's the small circles who say, like, we have to meet, and we don't know exactly how properly it will go on, but something needs to happen, and that's how we meet. And therefore, I'm very grateful that you are coming and bringing together all of us, because this is what is ultimately needed. And this leads me to my first central argument and point is, there is no new ism, and there cannot be a new Marxism or Schmittism or Weberism or anything. It requires the knowledge, the experience, and the intelligence of the swarm. It requires us to open up to the fact that we really do not know, that we kind of are ready for the unknown if we want to come to a good future. And it requires that we free ourselves from the idea that there will be one great model developed which will serve on a good way to the future. And I would go so far and include even the Sustainable Development Goals. They serve very well as cornerstones, but they cannot constitute a new model, because the paths towards it need to be developed, and they need to be developed on different ways, in different levels. And this is what we naturally came up with. Nobody should aim to have followers, besides maybe on Twitter or whatever these things, but fellows. So we came up with this word of fellowship, not referring to the academic fellowship, going for somewhere to study for a shorter time, but really like being on a path together, on a path towards a common goal, a good future, a good tomorrow, but being open, recognizing differences, recognizing different attitudes, different values, maybe even. Nina will speak more about values, me with my experience in politics and business and international advisory, I think we are very aware of the time pressure. And it's my conviction that we cannot leave it to the generation of Greta Thunberg to fix this. There's estimations among science between 5, the more skeptical, or 20 years, the more optimistic, for us to come to a new model. What the new model means is not just a socio-economic model, but a new lifestyle. And that means for us on Earth, all, not just mankind, but it's with all beings, with all sentient beings. And therefore, we have this motto carved out for the Fellowship Foundation that we set up, is to catalyze leaders to work jointly to co-create planetary well-being for all that live on this planet. And I think that's a crucial point. And that leads to this last point, is that we are focusing on leaders of today and tomorrow. Because it is indeed often a small circle that is preparing the paradigm shift, that is preparing, pre-thinking, testing, organizing ways into a good and new tomorrow. And due to this time pressure in particular, I think we should work with the leaders of today and tomorrow. And that's what we do in our work in our foundation. Nina will speak a bit more about the values that is based on and how this will work. We will finish with.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, I think that at this time, what we're seeing also with this virus, how, and Susanna, when we spoke to her a couple of days ago, this oneness, the connection of all, and this shows how connected we are. So here's this village far away from, even from Berlin, and there's something that happens there, how it can bloom and it affects the whole world. Prime example of this interconnection. We also find that doesn't serve. We are a part of the purpose-driven innovation ecosystem. We co-hosted the kickoff event here in Berlin. And this is part, as we consider this, it's the idea of fellowships that we have one fellowship here, the New World Fellowship Foundation, there's PDIE. They're kind of these circles that we're part of, and they're connected. And then something becomes like an armada together. We are all on our ships in a way, but we're going together. So there's no competition. There is movement and purposeful movement together. When we had our founding meeting, Stefan and I had written down some of the values for the foundation, and what we beautifully keep learning is also at times to let go. So there's a collective intelligence that is greater actually than the individual one. It requires individual input, but you allow for something greater to bloom as you come together. And some of the values, I just wanted to share these that came out were advocating community, advocating this collaborative togetherness, this collaborative work. And community is I find, happens very important, especially for those who have been quarantined, who have been alone. They can feel the need to be with other people. So this is a beautiful awareness, a yes to life. Yes to life means yes to everything that is happening. Not not that, but yes, bring it on. I'm going to grow from this. I'm going to learn from this. I'm going to experience this. So this full-on aliveness for everything when you say yes to it. And this is related to committed to evolve. What is coming in my life? Something is shifting within me. I'm evolving from the experience, no matter how I label it, whether it's good or bad. Committed to evolution. Celebrating beauty. Now we can look, can we see, can we hear the birds singing now? Can we see the dolphins in coming to the waters in Venice? Can we celebrate the beauty of this planet? Freedom for authenticity. Wow, there's a beautiful saying, unity in diversity. Can we understand that? Can we, I believe when we can see ourselves and one another, then we can appreciate the differences that we also see. So these are beautiful values, a part of the foundation that came up, and that, yeah, it's that are being, I believe, awakened. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So those those values are, yeah, were discussed and came up, and they constitute core principles of our work. And you might wonder, it's a little bit philosophical, and it's like talking about paradigm shift. I think it's quite crucial that we understand what is this paradigm shift, how is it constituted, what is it constituted by originally? And this is the point now, and maybe also for your next panel, Susanna, in a couple of days, how will it be constituted in this world, and what kind of systems or role systems will that produce? We are focusing our work on leaders and on leadership, and as Nina pointed out, you can see quite beautifully with this Corona crisis that no matter what you think of different national strategies on how to deal with it, but you see, what was discussed earlier with regard to climate change, for many years actually, things were just very fast put in place here. And indeed, political leadership had a major impact and can have. So the leadership of politics, the leadership of business people, of scientists joined, I think is what is crucial. And what we work with is, and why we work with this is that in our experience, it is crucial that those who envision a good new future are exchanging, are getting ready, and are also those who, activate it. May it be on the streets, as it was in '89 with demonstrations, but actually it was preceded by prayers for peace. With candles were those demonstrations, and not with weapons. So it's what's happened earlier was actually a forgiveness, a paradigm shift in the mind and in the heart set. So I want to just briefly for a minute delve into what kind of leader might be needed, what typos, what characteristica to lead into a good new future. I'm not going to mention any names here, but you see also in the different types of leaders that certain countries have, how approaches can differentiate, and what results they produce. And still often in our world, in politics and also in business, leaders are very much led by ratio, by thinking, by science only. And I say only because it's very valid, and I think it would be even needed more science and the interconnectedness of science. So that is the level one that we work with, is to broaden the radar, to connect the dots, to inform more, so that those working with, say, like climate change and its effects are getting to know about artificial intelligence, about socio-economic developments, about financial systems, and vice versa. And the people are interconnecting, informing each other. That is a very, very important dimension, and it needs to be supported by the second dimension, and that's the dimension of the connection of mind, ratio, and heart and soul. And that is something that is obviously not so easily taught, but you can support it, and you can support it with different settings and techniques without following in particular this or that religion or ruler or meditation technique, but being open and to cultivate this connection of mind and heart, and not leading to cold-hearted, purely rational leaders, but connecting them. That is the second dimension, and that leads to the third dimension that is leading into Susanna's work, the oneness. If you have that, you understand and feel how things are connected, and that actually what you do or what you don't do as a leader is affecting. It's affecting your people, your kids, and also those in other places in other countries where you're not an elected leader or a board member of, but you understand that how those things are all connected. And to activate and to encourage leaders to go back after trainings, after meetings, after being exposed to life-changing experiences, maybe in the Arctic, in the wilderness, in slums, or in centers of artificial intelligence, to go back to their places, their ministries, their boards, their electorates, where they are placed, and to work for, to speak for, and to embody change themselves. This is what the fellowship program is about, and it's called New World Fellowships because it's about creating more of those circles and encouraging that. And yeah, bringing people together in exclusive, or special settings, like in the wilderness, and exposing them also to, situations that are difficult for people, like in slums, is life-changing experience and changes people's attitude and also their doing. This is our experience, and that's what we focus on. And yeah.
And we like to end with how we do this is very, very important. We feel it's very important that we cultivate a sense of joy in doing this work. So it's very important what you do, but it's also very, 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 very important how you do it. And we do something with stress and difficulty and tension. We feel the output also has that. Eventually it will show in the output. But if we cultivate the sense of doing it with purpose and joy.
Thank you, Nina.
Yeah.
That's a perfect conclusion, because this is beautifully connected to our next panelist. And you have, I think you have noticed that in this equation, planet and people, we are moving from the planet to the people, our focus. And now we have Maaike van den Boom. She's an author, a best-selling author, I can say. And she's a researcher in the sense of journalist and research journalist. May I use this expression, Maaike?
Yes, you may.
And she has worked extensively on happiness. So this sense of joy, which Nina just mentioned, is in the end the best driver of human behavior. And so I think we are closing a circle, and I'm happy to give the floor to Maaike van den Boom, and then we will have some time to exchange our views and go back maybe to the planet. Please,
okay.
Maaike.
Great, thank you, Susanna, for inviting me for this panel. I'm very happy. It was very inspiring to hear all the other people where I saw a lot of connection to my work. I traveled to the 30 most happy countries of the world to find out why are they happier than we are in Germany, because I live now in Sweden, but I am German. And after that, I focused on the Nordic countries because they are always among the happiest countries. So what is their secret? So now I can say, like, I feel I found a glimpse of why they are so happy. And now I travel to the most happy country. Now I'm a public speaker and helping companies to applying Nordic leadership, because I think that is not only a good example for future leadership, it is also makes people happy and more productive and creative and willing to work together on a common future. And after I have ended, I think you will understand why Greta Thunberg is coming from Sweden and why there is this this strange Swedish way in the corona crisis. So if you look at the countries, the Nordic countries, where I will now focus on, because it's a good frame you can look at. Then you see three similarities between that. They are very happy, and that is they have an extreme high self-expressing value. If you look at the value scale, they are extremely feminine, and they have an extreme high trust level, exceptional high trust level in the world, wherefore they are called the Nordic gold. So if you look at this self-impressing values, then you have the world value scale, and then you see, which I don't know. You see, however, Sweden very up in the corner at giving the people the possibility to express themselves. And what I think is so interesting is, why are these people like this? Why is self-expressing so important? It's because they learn it in school. They already learn it from early age on. Speak up. It's not important that you're the best in this or the best in that, or that we measure it with grades. And that's why they have so late in a late age they have grades. It's in the 8th, that's when they are like, let's say 14, 15 years old. They all have to be together in one school. We will not separate them. We want to have diversity. And what you get is young people, they get to know what I have to say is more important than if I'm the best. So they learn in a very early age to ask why. They question you, they question everything, they question themselves, and they learn to think by themselves. So these are so they have also the feeling what I say is okay, so I am okay. So you get very confident people, and then they, of course, do not shut up when they're in the when they enter the companies. They are still asking why. They still want to have the value. They still want to know, why are we doing this? Is this conform my values? So therefore, the Nordic companies are very value driven. So this is, like Alberto said, improving the quality of life instead of growing is very important for these countries, which they have a word for that in Sweden. It's like lagom. That means not too much, not too little, just, I mean, enough, you know, enough is enough. It has not to be the best of all. So, and these little kids, they learn in a very early age to take, like Christian said, they take responsibility. They have a word here in all Scandinavian countries, in Norway, in Sweden, and in Denmark. It's all the same. It's called frihet under ansvar. That means freedom under responsibility. You can never be free if you don't take responsibility for other people and for the society. And that is why Bildung is so important, because that is planted in their hearts. It's my freedom, but for the sake of all. So this is so if you wonder why Greta learned to speak up and just think, of course I can speak up because of course they listen to me, it's because she learned it. That's what they learn here. So you get very people that want to give, they want to have a contribute. But they contribute with their uniqueness. They are not like put into boxes, but they are all unique, which means we all have to arrange a little bit around each other, you know, talk a lot, find a consensus, so that we still can be a community, which is, by the way, also very important in school, because they do almost everything in groups, because the most important of school is that you learn to be a social person that takes from responsibility for yourself and the people around you. It's like to be a democratic citizens. I spoke last week because I wrote a chapter over Bildung, which Bildung, don't have a word for that in the English-speaking world. It's not education, but it's making you as a whole person, with your weaknesses, with the soft parts, with the strong parts. So that's why Bildung is important. So this Danish children told me that they, when I asked them, so what do you think? Why do you go to school? Why is it so important? It's because we learn to be a democratic citizen. And they take responsibility. So that was a lot about number one. It's the self-expressing value. Then, and that is always a very nice one, because I mean, feminine countries. you may you may feel it a little bit. You have to talk a lot, and look, if I'm doing well, do you doing well? You know, it's like this soft thing that takes a lot of time. Consents, my God, a lot of people in Germany say we don't have time for this consents, and you know, but it's like super soft. It's like very feminine. And yes, indeed, Swedes, if you look at Hofstede dimensions, Geert Hofstede, then the Swedish are like with 5% very feminine. That does not mean that they are running around with pink pullovers, so we know they are very feminine, but it means for this, it's not like, in contrary to very masculine societies, it's not important that I'm better than you, or I'm the best, or we got further more. It's important that we all together feel good. You know, that that it's a society where caring for each other is very important, and where quality of life is a sign of success. So the fundamental issue is what motivates people is not wanting to be the best, masculine, but like what you do, feminine, have a sense of what you do. So if you look at Japan, okay, the Swedes have like 5%. Japan is like 95%, Italy 70%, United States 62%, Germany 66%, Denmark as a Nordic country 16%. So this is how, I mean, if you all, I'm always like using this idea. If you imagine you want to work together, and then like the Vikings, they jumped into a ship. But how do you how do you manage to jump into a ship together if everyone uses their elbows? And I think that that if you learn that you and your uniqueness are so good as you are, be yourself is a core value in the Scandinavian countries. You don't need elbows to protect yourself. You don't need knowledge to hide for others, because that's an advantage. So you can share. You can share knowledge for the best of all, and that's what the Nordics do. And I think that's the reason why they are also so successful, and why e.g. Sweden is like leading the innovation in the European countries. So true, but that everything is not possible if you don't have this high trust level. So trust is the core for everything. Without trust, life is incredible, complicated. You need contracts. You need to reinsure. Is it really? I mean, you know. So you cannot have easygoing and strong and nära, do the Swedish say, close relations, deep relations. You don't get without trust. And on the other side, having the trust to let people go, believe in other people, believe in the good. You cannot do that if you have no trust. So this high trust level means high social trust in the degree, means it's the degree to which people trust other people who they don't know. And that makes life incredible easy, and makes it possible that people do develop themselves. They dare a lot. They just do a lot. So and that is really, really deep rooted in the folk movement. Folks, they had, like in the Nordics, a folk movement, so that all people were in the early 1844s. They started to apply this sort of Bildung, which, by the way, came from the Germans, like Herder, Fichte, von Humboldt. Man, they really took it, and they applied it, that all people always are involved. They are trusted. They are listened to. They are involved. So they will always be involved. So if we want to have this paradigm shift, then we need to have this involvement of the people. And I think there the Nordics are really the top, that they can create this involvement from an early age on. So if you ask me how we get this, then it's of course a high transparent state. Of course, here in the Nordics, you see that it's very carefully. They really have a respect for the taxes people pay. They're also very transparent, and of course, that all people have the building. That's very important. But I think start at schools. Start to give little children already, and of course also later in the companies, because we will not wait until our little ones are grown up and then we can change the society. No. Everyone can change it like now, but if we have more, if we focus more on what should school be, what should be Bildung, and Bildung is an ongoing process whole your life. So also the Bildung of the adults, they have here a lot of huge amount of money they put in that. So build, how can we help people to be the best of themselves, so they can contribute to find solutions we need for the future, for the sake of all. And then I say, oh, look at the little ones and look at everyone you meet. How can I help you to be the best version of yourself? And then I think we can get a huge step. And now I have talked 13 minutes, so I have to stop with greetings from Stockholm.
Thank you so much, Mike. That was really a shot of energy for all of us. And we have a couple of questions. We have a question for Myra and a question for Nina and Stefan, but I would love to give the floor to Myra first, because she was very diligent in speaking her 10 minutes, but I think she has something more to add, and especially after all these stimulating interventions. And so the question is from Saverio Di Benedetto, is what about, in your opinion, is the role of national sovereignty to protect ecosystem? Could this be complementary with international and global strategies? But let's talk also about trust and feminine and whatever you want.
Well, thank you. You know, what I sense is happening is that as we see the mesocosm, which is the world system that we have created over time as humanity, dissolve, because we know that it must, in order for the transformation to occur, that what awakens in us is the connection we have to the macro, which is the universal pattern, the original design, in a sense, begins to live in us. We pick it back up again, because you see, we're a young species with incredible potential. And I would suggest that when we begin to think about technology, that we remember that we're a part of something that biochemically and alchemically can turn on our dormant capacity. We have the frontal lobes in our upper part of this body that we have that's not been fully used or active in our culture, in humanity. We have yet to blossom as humanity in relationship to the planetary being. We're on an incredible journey, and we've learned a lot over the last 8,000 years, of which we've been involved in conquest and capture and all of these things we've been working out. But now we have something we didn't have, is a real sense of being connected to a planetary being in concert and in relationship with all species. And we must not think of our numbers as the problem. It's our place in the web of life that we need to find. And when we do, we recognize, like every cell or the smallest bit of matter, we are a field of being a field. Information is flowing at the macro level and the micro level, and we are waking up to be a part of that technology, and that will drive our systems. So around the question of sovereignty, we all become to see life as sovereign, clustered together in a pattern and a design that harmonizes with itself. And so what an opportunity for humanity to step forward, to emerge into the next greater context of being supra in our awareness that what we do at the smallest level as a fractal impacts the whole, and we begin to take responsibility for the state of consciousness that we walk with as a being. So what that says is, no, some of the boundaries that we operate in, we will shift so that those boundaries that we call nation states become supra boundaries that are connected to the Earth systems. And that does mean that localization becomes a very powerful part of what we scale to, but we always see that as a part of the whole. So I see an enormous opportunity. I want to mention one other thing, is when I worked with others on the open working group to create what we know as the Sustainable Development Goals, we've had much more than 17, but we distilled them down to 17, that we had 18, and that was joy. We now call it SDG 0, joy. For those of us who worked on it and continue to work on it, we knew then that every goal was interrelated. And I learned that from the children in Bhutan, because I was working on education. And so when we are listening to the earth and we are not acting as if we can be ever separate, we include this intelligence of the planetary being in everything that we're creating. It helps us to organize around a coherent, resonant energy that organizes life beyond what you and I can see. And it puts us in the right place within the creation. The challenge has not been population, it has been affluence, the overuse, taking more of the share of what the planet offers and not distributing it. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but I tell you, it leads to governance structures that will encapsulate our values. And our values will be a recognition that we're a part of a whole. We are, as a field of being, a whole. And what are wholes doing? They're moving to greater systems of wholeness. So in the pause, the opportunity we have is to recognize we're a part of a planetary system. And we get to move with everything we have experienced into a greater system of wholeness, which is a beautiful thing that the supranational idea encompasses. How do we respond to that in the mesocosm that we will create that is in harmony with the macro and the micro? That's what we're looking for. And what we see is the money debt system is obsolete that we've had, because we can go down the list. I think the other piece too is that the response must be intergenerational. We have 7 generations living, and all of that experience and heart and intel needs to be pointed in the direction of moving us into the emergence, which is our potential to awaken as a whole, recognizing itself together in a superstructure, which is the design, right? Recognizing the design so we can feel, imagine, do, and share. And so it's my optimism soars when I'm with others who are coming to this awareness together. It's an incredible opportunity for entrepreneurship, in that Antra is an undertaker. And the choreography that comes out of having a reverence for what is dying, for what we've experienced, which is in every eulogy, right? A praise for the life we've lived. We must do that. We must put down what no longer serves with reverence and let it rest so that we can take the life force freed up from holding on to what doesn't work. We take the life force and bring it in to this creative, innovative time that all of humanity has the opportunity to participate in. We have traditional knowledge still alive on the planet that we need to rush to reconnect ourselves with. People who never lost a sense of being connected to the planetary being hold something of great value. And we for them, those of us who have separated. And I just see what so many of you have talked about in each of your presentations coming fully forward. And so it allows us to take everything that we are, not leaving anything behind, and bringing it into the wholeness of our experience. And there's great power, there's great life force, and that is where the planet can meet us and match what we're resonating with. This is the planet asking us to step up. We can't go wrong doing that.
Thank you so much, Myra, really. And so it is. Now I'm happy to complete the second round very fast, and I will give the floor to Alberto for some final remarks. Please, Alberto, turn on your camera.
That I manage. Oh, yes. Thank you again for inviting me in this webinar, because I was really fascinated by the discussion that has been here. I want to add only a very small thing that you have introduced already before, dealing with the need for also a change in our disciplinary paradigm, and to move to a much wider transdisciplinarity in all the level of education and in all our knowledge, which is not completely easy, because basically as a species we are a bit conservative, so we can make impressive changes in technology, but our capability to actually innovate in our behavior and so on is a bit lower than other species, because basically we are evolving from the past and we are a bit less projected in the future. But from this point of view, it's clearly for us a great challenge, but it's absolutely necessary that we make the change and we move towards a wider transdisciplinary. And what I would like to say is that, well, for example, at our level in our university, as you were highlighting, there's a strong effort in actually establish a much wider discussion among all the different disciplines, and simply breaking not only the boundary, but entering towards a more synthetic view of sustainability as a general concept. And we are part of a network of University for Sustainable Development in Italy, which has actually focused on this specific point of reinforcing the transdisciplinarity in all levels of education in Italy, and offering all the knowledge and the competencies and the capability that we have in the university and in the research area in order to support our society and our also political counterpart in order to move forward a stronger and wiser sustainability of our actual development. That is the only thing that I would like to add, and then I also need to thank all the other panelists, because I was really interested in all the discussion. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Alberto. And yes, I agree with you. We are a very conservative species, but I think the panelists in this panel are just the exception, which confirms the rule. As I think we have seen so many change makers here, and I would love to move back to Christian, as he didn't complete his discourse. So maybe you have something to add, Christian, or maybe you just want to add something on joy, as we have moved into this field.
Yeah, it's almost impossible to add anything to this broad discussion by so many amazing panelists. It's an honor to be included into these. What I'm always thinking about is that in order to create any kind of future, we as intelligent beings, we would be able to actually imagine a future. So we could paint a picture or build a model or create a story, a narrative. And I think that something like this is really necessary to look. If we say co-create a better tomorrow, yeah, what is this better tomorrow, and how does it actually look like, and how does it look like from my personal point of view? How do I live my life in an ideal future? How is actually an ideal day in the life, and how can this ideal life be in harmony with nature, be in harmony with all the other people around me, my community, and yeah, how can this be possible? And I always think it's a very good exercise to collect many people's ideas about this. And yeah, you can see that I choose also this kind of science fiction like background, and yeah, I like to imagine the future as something which is people call it utopia, and when people use the term utopia, they want to say basically that it's impossible. But I want to believe in utopia, and that's I think where I can close right now.
Thank you, Christian. I love this word, utopia, because I think that without utopia, we wouldn't move in any direction. So we need to imagine something first, and then we can move towards that something. So it's an essential step in our evolution. So utopistic thinkers are the ones who open the way to the others, in a sense. So I don't know if you can agree. I would like them to ask Nina and Stefan if they want to add something. And there is also a question for you, as there is somebody asking in the question and answers column if you can tell something about the kind of leaders you're working with, or make examples of leaders you're working with. I don't know if you can, if there is any privacy rule. Please, you have the floor.
You start, maybe.
Yeah, so it's not just the two of us. It is a fellowship, and those that are part of the fellowship are also working with different leaders in different fields. So, of course, some are working with leaders in huge corporations, and others are working with youth leaders. Stefan is his background is politics, so this is, let's say, we all have our specialties, but it's also a larger network. So we are connected to leaders in business and in politics and in some ways activism, because we are bringing them together. It's not just a silo of now the politicians are talking only to the politicians. The point is that we're all talking to one another. We're getting the perspectives from different disciplines. And that's what we see, what has been not a, maybe a place of perhaps being stuck, is that even with world leaders, it has been me, my people, my land, what is best for them. And it's more the expansion of not, because it's not saying not to think about that or care about your people, yourself, but also expanding globally. And that can only happen in collaboration. So this is working with leaders who make decisions and helping to expand that their decisions are also global decisions.
Mm-hmm. So I would say we have, I had, others have the pleasure and the honor to work with very different leaders. I worked in international politics with some leaders who were prime ministers, leading ministers, major investors, people who really moved things. And if you talk to some people who discuss new technologies, artificial intelligence, and what this will do to the world, you will see some are interested in more business interests, and some are more like what Christian very beautifully pointed out, a higher or a deeper purpose. So they are even looking into or even aware of how what is being done there in technology will affect mankind, and whether they should invest here or there, or what kind of regulation would be needed. So that's one of one branch. Another very different type that I enjoy very much, actually, and that was also pointed out here, and maybe Maike will come across some of those beautiful people in the high north, is indigenous. And I totally agree with Myra, and would love to continue this conversation with a nice glass of wine or a coffee. There is a lot of wisdom, deeper wisdom to be found there. And it's not just mythological, but it's very applicable if we are able to listen. So there's also some filmmakers that we are working with. I can point out it's a very beautiful movie that was shot, The Council of the 12 and Above, so called The 12. If you Google this movie, something I would highly recommend. And if any more questions around this, please get in touch with us. Also, we are very open there. The thing is, why we do this is because I, Nina, and many others in this group, in this fellowship, had the personal experience. It really takes one man, one woman, or two or three only sometimes to step up and say, like, we can do different. And this is how we would like to do it. Join us. And this within a company can lead to a total reconstruction of the company, and not just a little bit of a band-aid of mindfulness, but really a different way of dealing with each other in the company, but also with being aware of the purpose of serving the people or a higher goal or society, and what it means to be connected. And that's the kind of people that come to us, plus many of those who are in influential positions and have a lot, not a headache, and sometimes also a heartache, because they understand what is going on and what is going wrong, and what could happen if we are not changing. And in our experience, it needs many of us to move towards a good, positive tomorrow. And it needs more than just the envisioning, but it needs also the courage to step up to your minister, to your shareholders, the General Assembly, or whatever you have, and say, like, no, we can do different. And that's what we want to encourage, catalyze.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Stefan. And I really appreciated these final words. We need to be brave, and that's a strong invitation. And I will leave the final word to to Maike, and I'm very happy to leave the final word to Maike, because really happiness is should be the final word. Happiness, joy, love, if I may add. So what we live for.
Yeah.
It's up to you, Maike.
No, I feel the pressure of this woo last word, but I also listened to you, and I find it interesting because while I was listening, I was thinking, okay, leader, and then I think, okay, it's about leaders, but if you know, then I people that were just down on the workshop, they told me we are empowered to be leaders, so we don't have only one leader, we are all leaders. So how can we give people the empowerment, the freedom, and the unstructured? They all can evolve to leaders, because then we don't need to go up to these leaders, but it's coming from the grassroots. It's evolving from the grassroots. That is the secret, I think. Yeah, okay, happiness. Okay, of course, these people are very happy because they feel proud and they feel that they can make a difference, and that is, of course, makes them very, very happy to make this curve to happiness.
So empowerment is one of the keys for happiness.
Oh, what do you say?
Sorry, empowerment. We can say it's one of the keys for happiness.
Yes, yeah, empowerment, but not only for just never forget the whole picture, because otherwise it's a short time. It's of happiness. So happiness means, yeah, give the best from yourself, so we can all be the best together. And ourselves.
Thanks a lot. Wonderful. Anyone has something to add to these conclusions? If you want to all unmute yourself, we can say goodbye all together.
It's been a pleasure meeting you. It's been a pleasure meeting you and listening to you all, and I would love to see the day that we will sit together in Stockholm or Berlin with a nice glass, or in beautiful Italy, and continue.
You're very welcome.
I'm for Italy. I'm for Italy.
I love Stockholm. I lived there too.
Thank you all. It has been a real pleasure having you all here. We will have the next and last webinar of the series next Friday, so at 4 p.m. Central European Time, on global rules for paradigm shift. So it's the conclusion, and it has been a beautiful way, a beautiful journey with all of you. Thanks a lot, and see you hopefully in front of a glass of wine. Yeah. Bye bye.
Thank you so much,
Susanna.
Thank you. Bye.
Hello. Bye bye.
Hello.
Dankeschön.
Bye.